Good afternoon. Welcome to Living and Learning's professional development video series designed to equip you personally and professionally. Hi, my name is Ryan Delos, and I will be talking about the topic of global and intercultural fluency. In order to speak a little bit about this, I'll provide a little bit of my background. I was born in the United States, but I was raised in South America. I lived in Argentina, Ecuador, and Costa Rica. And during my college years, I decided to study in Israel for a semester with an abroad program. After graduating from college, I moved to South Korea, and I've been here since 2007, so about a little over 12 years now. And I'm very interested in the idea of being a global citizen and just being able to interact with different cultures and different types of people all around the world. So what I'd like to do today is first to explain define what culture is, as well as fluency. I'll define those two terms, and then provide a couple of examples of how we can see what fluency and culture, and more specifically intercultural fluency, looks like, and discuss a couple of ways in which we can see differences around the world and ways in which people live, and then provide a couple of takeaways and specific characteristics that help us understand what an intercultural, globally fluent person typically looks like. And so to begin with, we'll define what culture is. And essentially, culture is the way of being of certain people in a society or in a group at a certain time in a certain place. And this can involve a variety of different things, whether it's language or food or religious practices and beliefs, different artistic creations, can involve perspectives and interpretations and attitudes towards a certain way of doing things. And these are all major components of what make culture what it is. And so fluency is going to be feeling comfortable with a certain skill. And so typically what most people talk about when it comes to fluency is language, such as learning a second language. And when you can interact comfortably, whether it's speaking, reading, or writing, and you can use that language in a way that's very comfortable and easily navigate with using that language, typically a second language, or in my case with many of my students at the international school that I work at, their third, fourth, and sometimes fifth languages that they are using to interact with the world around them. And so the first story that I'd like to use to help us understand what global intercultural fluency looks like is the story of Jesus. It's found in John chapter 4, and he meets a woman at the well. It's a Samaritan woman, and what ends up happening is Jesus crosses all kinds of barriers and differences between him and her, where Jesus is going to come from a Jewish background. The Samaritan woman is Samaritan. She comes from a tribe that was not exiled to Babylon like the rest of the Jewish people had been, but it was a group of people, Jewish people, that ended up marrying Canaanites in the land of Israel at the time. And because of that, Jews saw that they were quite different racially, but also religiously in their practices. And so that created a lot of conflict. And as we know, the Samaritan woman, she was an adulterer. she was living in sin. And so not only is Jesus crossing gender barriers, he's crossing racial and cultural barriers, he's crossing religious belief barriers, and he's also crossing moral boundaries that is quite shocking for a male to be approaching a woman like this during the day. And so we see that Jesus is comfortable with this interaction. It doesn't faze him. And he actually asks her for water and asks her for help. And they have an exchange and interaction, and Jesus reveals himself as the Messiah. But we see that he does not allow any aspect of cultural clashes to get in the way from him interacting with her comfortably. In terms of other ways that we can see how intercultural or global fluency happens is by reflecting on our own response to ways in which we view and respond to ways in which people do things. If we take, for example, the church in the United States, from the churches that I have attended and been to over the last several years, I've noticed that church services last between maybe an hour, hour and 15, maybe an hour and a half at the most, while church services in Argentina, where we attended in Ecuador, could last anywhere between an hour and a half to 3 hours and sometimes even longer, depending on how things were going throughout the service. And so is one way right or is one way wrong? I would say that's something that we would all need to think about and consider when we think of the Christian faith and think of our relationship with God and how the Spirit moves, and why does a particular culture or a particular group of people act in such a way or respond to their beliefs in that way as well. Another example is when it comes to practicing spiritual disciplines, where many times, from my mostly Western perspective, I spend very few solid hours praying. I don't cut out a certain amount of time throughout the day to pray. While the Koreans, they will get up at in the middle of the night, 3, 4 in the morning, maybe 5 in the morning, and they will pray until 6, 7, 8 in the morning, as this is a specific way in which they believe they can encounter God, experience God, and start the day in such a way that they know that they are focused on who God is and for him to carry them through the day. And so these are just a couple of practices in the Christian faith that are quite clearly identified as a bit different in the way that they're practiced in different cultures. And so depending on how we react and see these differences will determine how fluent or how ultimately comfortable we are with experiencing and interacting with people who are different from us. And as I understand, you are going into the workplace, and this is no different in the workplace. There are many different ideas, there are many different cultures, there are different races that we interact with regularly, whether you're in the United States or around the world. And as the world continues to get smaller, and as we do more and more interculturally, the more important it is to have certain characteristics. And so what I would say are major characteristics that stand out for interculturally and globally fluent people is, one, it starts with open-mindedness, being teachable to understanding, listening, and respecting other ways of doing certain things. There's also a sensitivity to people's emotions and to their beliefs and their also their opinions and perspective. And the last thing that I would mention is ultimately um, being kind in the way that you treat one another. And so, if you can be open, teachable, and you can be sensitive and listen, and also be kind in the way that you react and respond to others, that'll go a long way in helping you just to enjoy different cultures, but also be more like Christ in his uh, in the way that he modeled for us, and the way that you interact with others, and ultimately um, gaining insights into ways in which you can be more like Jesus, and that's ultimately what we're all about. So thanks for listening, and I hope this was helpful for you today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.